Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast, we're doing a deep dive into something I think almost every English learner grapples with.
Oh, definitely. It's a big one. We're talking about why listening feels so much harder than reading in English, and maybe more importantly, why your brain gets so tired trying to keep up.
Exactly. You know that feeling, right? You can read an article, maybe a news story, you feel pretty comfortable, pretty fluent.
You're following along just fine.
And then you step into a real conversation, or even just try to watch a movie without subtitles, and suddenly, poof, you feel completely lost.
It's incredibly common.
Yeah.
And frustrating.
So that's our mission today. We want to really unpack the reasons, the linguistic ones, the psychological stuff, even some physiological aspects behind why listening comprehension often lags behind reading. Why does it feel like such hard work?
Yeah, and we're not just, talking about difficulty in general.
Yeah.
We're looking at a fundamental cognitive mismatch. How the brain processes written words versus how it has to deal with this fast, often messy stream of real-time speech.
I like thinking about it with this analogy. Reading English is kind of like strolling through a park. You've got a map, the paths are marked, you can stop, look around, reread the sign. You're in control.
Nice analogy. You set the pace completely.
But listening, oh man, listening feels like trying to jump onto a speeding train. In the fog.
Huh, that's a good one. It just rushes past, doesn't it? Whether you're ready or not.
So our goal here is to figure out why it feels like that speeding train and maybe give you some tools, some understanding to help bridge that gap.
Right. We want to understand what's happening when that mental fatigue kicks in, what's getting overloaded, and how can we turn that speeding train into something, more manageable, a ride you can actually handle.
Okay, so let's start with the absolute core difference, the one you mentioned already, control. When you read, you are basically the boss.
Absolutely. That control is everything for a learner. Reading lets you dictate the pace completely.
You can stop mid-sentence if you need to think.
Analyze the tricky structure. Look up a word you don't know. Spend 2 minutes on it if you have to.
Reread a whole paragraph until it finally clicks.
Yes. And that ability to self-pace, it just takes so much pressure off your brain. It reduces the cognitive load massively.
But listening,
Yeah.
no such luxury. It's happening right now, in real time. Non-negotiable.
It really is. If something flies past, maybe a word spoken quickly, an idiom you haven't heard, or just a tricky accent.
It's gone. Vanished. It really is like trying to grab smoke, isn't it? The information just disappears the moment it's spoken.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this forces your brain to decode instantly. There's no rewind button in a live conversation.
So that difference in control means the brain actually has to work in two pretty different ways, depending on whether it's reading or listening.
Radically different modes, yeah. When we read, we're using visual processing, obviously. We're relying on working memory, sure, but we're decoding based on fixed symbols, letters, words, and pretty standard grammar rules we see on the page.
So you build the meaning step by step using those visual anchors, like assembling something with instructions.
Kind of, yeah. It's pattern recognition based on consistent visual input. But listening, that taps into incredibly complex auditory processing.
How intense, you mean?
Much more intensive. Your brain has to decode sounds, rhythms, intonation, the melody of speech, and it has to do it on the fly, instantly.
There isn't that fixed visual word sitting there.
Nope. It's a continuous dynamic stream of sound waves. And this mode demands constant prediction what word is likely coming next, and immediate retention, holding on to the last few words just long enough to connect them to the current one. It's a juggling act.
And the stuff we actually hear isn't always the same as the stuff we read, linguistically speaking. I know David Crystal talks about spoken English being messier. What's that about?
Crystal's work is great on this. He highlights that written English is often the cleaned up version. It's been edited, polished, it follows the rules mostly.
The textbook version.
Pretty much. Spoken English, though, is the raw feed. It's spontaneous. And this raw stream includes a lot of what linguists call redundancies.
Things that don't add meaning, necessarily.
Right. Sounds or little phrases that are crucial for the speaker to manage the conversation in real time, but don't add direct meaning to the sentence.
Like,
Those kinds of things.
Exactly. They're fillers. They buy the speaker maybe a few vital milliseconds to think about what they're going to say next. They're like cognitive buffers for the person talking.
But for the listener, especially the non-native listener.
For the listener, they're often just noise. They add variability at the input stream. Your brain has to use extra processing power just to filter them out, to figure out what's meaningful and what's just filler.
Okay, so we have extra stuff like fillers, making it more complex. But kind of paradoxically, spoken English also leaves things out that we definitely expect in writing, right?
That's the other side of the coin. It's a real double challenge. You get this, well, fluff, but alongside it, you often get highly compressed language, structures that might look ungrammatical if you wrote them down.
Can you give an example of that? Think about maybe a student who understands a sentence like, "Are you going to go to the party later?" Perfectly clear in a book.
Right, standard grammar.
But then they hear someone say it in a real conversation. It might come out fast, maybe like, "You gonna go to the party later?" All slurred together. Maybe the speaker coughs mid-word, throws in an
Those clear words from the book just become a blur.
An auditory blur, yes.
Yeah.
The brain that was trained on the distinct, separate words struggles to map this rapid, messy sound stream back to the meaning it knows.
Okay, that perfectly sets up the idea of speed and cognitive overload. There's actual data on how fast people talk, isn't there?
There is, and it's really revealing. Psycholinguistic studies show that typical casual conversation among native speakers hums along at about 160 to 180 words per minute, sometimes even faster.
Which feels effortless if it's your first language.
Effortless, exactly. We don't even think about it.
But 160 to 180 words per minute, how does that speed clash with the brain's ability to actually process language, especially for a learner?
That's where the bottleneck happens. The challenge is what we call the processing window. For most people, it's estimated to be around 150 to maybe 200 words per minute. That's the rate at which we can comfortably take in information, decode it, and sort of store it temporarily.
Okay, so that range overlaps a bit with native speaking speed.
It does for native listeners. But if you're a non-fluent learner, think about all the extra work your brain is doing. You're dedicating huge chunks of your working memory, that limited mental scratch pad, to just decoding unfamiliar sounds, trying to translate the meaning in your head, searching for context clues.
Right, you're doing 3 or 4 tasks for every word, while the native speakers may be doing 1.
Essentially, yes. So if the native speaker is cruising along at 170 WPM and the learner needs maybe twice the processing time per word because of all that extra cognitive work, their effective processing window shrinks dramatically, maybe down to 100 or 120 WPM, perhaps even less.
So the input speed, 170 WPM, is instantly way faster than their actual processing capacity, say 110 WPM.
That's the crunch point. You're immediately operating beyond your capacity. You hear the first word, start processing it, but before you're done, the second, third, and fourth words have already arrived and flown past.
You fall behind instantly.
You do. It creates this continuous backlog. Your brain is constantly trying to catch up, and that pushes the system into cognitive overload very, very quickly. And that is what leads to that deep mental fatigue you feel after just, say, 10 minutes of intense listening.
Your brain is basically running a race. It's almost guaranteed to lose at that speed. No wonder it's exhausting.
And compare that to reading again. A non-native reader might read slower, maybe 200 or 300 WPM, slower than a native reader perhaps, but crucially,
They can stop.
they can stop, they pause, they reread, they manage their cognitive load, they give their brain those little recovery moments it desperately needs. Listening in real time offers zero buffer, zero recovery. You just have to keep up constantly.
That student you mentioned earlier, the one who aced reading tests but froze during TED Talks,
Yeah.
they summed it up perfectly. In books, words stay still. In speech, they dance away.
Oh, I love that. They dance away. That sensation is exactly it. It's the feeling of information arriving faster than your brain can grab onto it and process it. It's the physical feeling of cognitive overload.
Okay, so that intense pace, that dancing away feeling, leads us straight into our first big specific reason listening is so tough. Let's call it the speed demon of natural English.
Speed demon, I like it, because that speed isn't just, optional for native speakers. It's pretty much mandatory for conversation to sound natural and flow smoothly.
Right. Native speakers almost never enunciate every single word perfectly, like they're reading from a script. Unless they're trying to be very clear, maybe.
Or maybe being sarcastic. But yeah, in normal chat, efficiency is key. We blend sounds, we shorten words, we compress things. It makes speech faster and smoother for us.
But for the learner, who might have learned each word as a distinct, separate sound?
For the learner, the moment those carefully learned words accelerate and merge together, they can become completely unrecognizable. It's like the building blocks suddenly melted.
And the most obvious and maybe most challenging result of this compression is the way we use reductions and contractions. They look simple, with an apostrophe in writing, but audibly.
Oh, audibly they are transformed. They are like auditory camouflage for the learner. We really need to spend a moment on these because they are everywhere.
Okay, give us some common examples.
Well, the classics. Going to almost always becomes gonna. Want to becomes wanna. Have got to slurs into gotta.
And it's not just dropping a letter, is it? It changes the whole sound.
Changes the rhythm, the vowel sounds, everything. It's a fundamental transformation of the sound profile.
How about a really common phrase like, I don't know, learners see 4 distinct words there.
Right. 4 clear, strong form words in their mental dictionary. But in speech, it compresses down into this super rapid, often mumbled sound. I don't know. Where did the O to go? Where did the O sounds go? Exactly. The do and not basically collapse into a single, quick, nasalized sound. If your brain is listening for 4 distinct syllables, it's just not going to register, as the same phrase.
Okay, let's take the ultimate stress test for this.
Yeah.
The question, what are you going to do? 5, maybe 6 clear words on paper.
The classic. In rapid casual English, that transforms almost instantly into something like, what you gonna do?
What you gonna do? Wow.
Yeah. So the learner, expecting maybe 5 or 6 distinct sounds, just heard what? Maybe 2 or 3 weird syllables. Wetcha and gonna.
Their brain has to work backwards like crazy.
In a split second, it has to somehow reverse engineer whatcha back into what are you, and gun back into going to, decode the do, and understand the question, all before the speaker moves on to the next sentence. It creates this huge gap between the expected sound and the actual sound.
That speed and compression. Reminds me of that story about the international intern. Really highlights the real world impact.
Oh yeah, the intern in New York, perfect example. He was, I think, from Tokyo. Impeccable written English, knew his grammar, knew his vocabulary from textbooks.
Top student, probably.
Looked great on paper, but dropped into a fast-paced New York business environment. He was drowning in meetings because that world is just inherently fast, full of jargon, full of these compressed forms.
And there was one specific meeting where it all fell apart because of this speed and maybe some slang.
That's the one. His department head was ending this, high-pressure discussion and wraps it up quickly, saying something like, all right, team, we got to wrap this up by EOD. Shoot me an email if you hit any snags.
Okay, break down that sentence for a learner.
All right, we have got to. Compressed. Wrap this up. That's an idiom meaning finish or conclude. EOD jargon for end of day. Shoot me an email. Informal way to say send me an email. If you hit any snags, ya is you, and snags means problems or difficulties.
So even written down, that's quite a bit to unpack.
Definitely. If he saw it written, he could probably figure it out eventually.
No.
Look up EOD, guess snags from context.
But hearing it spoken fast, all those things hit him at once.
Bam. The combination of gotta, the idiom, wrap this up, which he apparently took literally, like packaging something.
Yeah.
The acronym EOD, the slang shoot me, the reduction, it was just too much, too fast.
So what happened? He misunderstood. Wrap this up.
Completely. He missed the deadline for the actual task being discussed because he thought wrap this up referred to finishing some other maybe physical task later. He ended up working late on the wrong thing, not because he didn't know the words individually, but because his brain just couldn't decode the rapid-fire, compressed, idiomatic stream in that moment.
Wow. That panic and confusion, it perfectly illustrates what happens when your working memory gets overloaded. This links straight into cognitive load theory, doesn't it? John Sweller's work.
It's a perfect fit for Sweller's theory. Cognitive load theory helps explain why this high-speed listening is so draining. Sweller talks about our working memory, that very limited mental space where we actively process information and how it can get overloaded.
There are different types of load, right?
Right. There's intrinsic load, which is just the inherent difficulty of the material itself, like a complex grammar rule. Then there's extraneous load, which is the mental effort wasted because of how the information is presented.
Like a poorly designed textbook page.
Or in our case, like trying to decode what you're going to do, spoken at 180 words per minute. That high speed, the contractions, the accents, they all massively increase the extraneous cognitive load. Your brain burns all its energy just trying to figure out what the words are instead of understanding the actual meaning.
And when that extraneous load gets too high,
it swamps the system. It maxes out your working memory. Reading lets you manage this because you can pause, reread, reduce the load yourself. Listening at high speed forces your brain into constant overload. You're decoding, predicting, storing, all simultaneously with no breaks.
Like juggling too many balls at once.
Exactly. It's like trying to do complex calculations while someone shouts random numbers at you nonstop. That's the source of that profound mental fatigue. Your brain is just working way too hard on the decoding mechanics.
And just to add another layer of complexity, this speed demon isn't even consistent, is it? The pace varies depending on where the speaker is from.
Oh, absolutely. Regional variations in tempo are huge. What feels normal speed can change quite a bit. You might find, for instance, a classic Southern American drawl stretches syllables out a bit more.
Giving the learner a tiny bit more processing time.
Maybe a fraction more, yeah. A small, unexpected buffer. But then you compare that to speakers from big urban centers, think New York, London, maybe Chicago. They often speak at a consistently faster clip, really pushing that 180 WPM average, sometimes higher.
And research actually backs that up, the idea of faster urban speech.
It does. Studies, I know the University of Pennsylvania has done work on this, confirm that average speech rates tend to be higher in urban populations. So for a learner who's already struggling with a shrinking processing window,
Moving to a big city could make it even harder.
exponentially harder, potentially. The decoding challenge just ramps up.
So if your main English learning has been, say, listening to carefully enunciated academic lectures or language learning podcasts,
Where the speaker is deliberately clear and maybe a bit slower.
then you switch on a fast-paced American sitcom like Friends with all the overlapping dialogue and quick jokes.
Or worse, try to follow a real political debate or a fast-talking comedian.
You suddenly realize the speed you learned is not the speed of real life.
Yeah. It's a shock to the system. Reading the script of Friends, probably manageable, the words are clear, the jokes are written out, but watching it, you've got the speed, the contractions, the overlapping lines, the sarcasm, the interruptions. The learner has to handle all of that at once. It's a whole different ballgame.
Okay, so if the sheer speed is the first hurdle, the second massive challenge has got to be the incredible variety in how English sounds, the huge tapestry of accents and dialects around the world.
Oh, it's enormous. Reading gives you this nice standardized visual input, right? The word water looks exactly the same whether the writer is from London, Los Angeles, or Lagos.
Consistent.
Predictable.
But listening, your brain has to be ready to process an almost infinite variety of sounds for that same word. We're talking British RP, Cockney, Scouse, Scottish, Irish, countless American regional accents, Australian, New Zealand, South African, Indian English, Singaporean English.
The list is endless.
Practically. And each one of those accents twists the basic sounds of English, the phonemes, in its own unique way. So the learner might know the word car perfectly well from their textbook.
They know the meaning, they know the spelling.
But if the sound that hits their ear doesn't match the sound they originally learned and stored in their brain,
Then, in that split second of listening, the word is effectively useless. Their brain is scrambling, thinking, wait, what was that sound? Did I hear that right? Is that the word I know? It adds another layer of processing delay and uncertainty.
let's talk about some specific sound shifts that really trip learners up. Vowel sounds are a big one, right? Especially UK versus US.
Vowel shifts are huge. They're often the first thing you notice. Take a simple word like dance. In many parts of the UK, especially southern England, you'll hear a long, open ah sound, dance.
Like in father.
Sort of, yeah. But in most of America, it's a flatter, shorter A sound, more like in cat, dance.
Dance versus dance. Okay.
Two distinctly different vowel sounds. Your brain has to learn to accept both acoustic signals as pointing to the exact same concept, the same word.
And then there's the infamous R, the rhotic versus non-rhotic thing. This can be a nightmare for learners.
It's absolutely fundamental. Most American English is rhotic, meaning the R sound is pronounced pretty clearly, especially after vowels. So car sounds like, well, car. The strong R. Park the car.
You hear the R's.
Clearly. But many other accents, standard British English, RP, Australian, New Zealand, South African, even some parts of the US like Boston or the South are non-rhotic. They tend to drop or soften that R sound after a vowel.
So car becomes...
Or like ka, or maybe ka. Park the car becomes park the car.
If you learned English in America and then hear a British person say, park the car.
You might genuinely not recognize the word car at first. Your brain is listening for that R sound and it's just not there. It fails the pattern match.
And this non-erotic thing can even add sounds where they don't belong in writing, can't it? The linking R.
Ah, yes, the intrusive R. That's another fun one. A non-rhotic speaker might say something like, the idea of it. But because idea ends in a vowel and of starts with one, they might naturally insert an R sound to link them smoothly. The idea of it.
Even though there's no R in the spelling of idea.
Nope, it just makes the speech flow better for them. But for the learner, it's another unexpected sound popping up, potentially causing confusion. Where did that R come from?
Okay, so we have vowels shifting, R's appearing and disappearing. What about sounds that simply don't exist in the learner's native language? That must be extra hard.
That forces the brain into a really tough spot. It has to basically create a whole new sound category from scratch, which is incredibly mentally taxing. The classic example is the English the sound.
Both sounds, right? The in the I and the to in think.
Exactly. The voiced P, E, and the unvoiced I. Many languages, French, German, Japanese, Russian, many others simply don't have these sounds, these dental fricatives.
So what do speakers of those languages do?
They tend to substitute the closest sound from their own language. Maybe the becomes an S or a Z sound, or maybe a T or a D, or even an F or V.
So think might sound like sink or tink or fink.
Right. And the might sound like Z or D. This means the learner has to constantly, consciously work to both produce the correct English sound when speaking and recognize it when listening, even when it's pronounced differently by other non-native speakers or when they themselves might be tempted to mishear it based on their own pronunciation habits. It adds cognitive load both ways.
This reminds me of that story about the German student studying in Scotland. Perfect example of high reading skills meeting a tough dialect.
Oh, that's a fantastic illustration. Here's this student, really strong academic reader, acing written tests, lands in Scotland for university lectures, and he's completely lost.
The Scottish accent is beautiful, but it can be very challenging for learners. Very distinct.
Extremely distinct. You've got the rolled R's, unique vowel sounds. Boat might sound more like bot, specific vocabulary, a different rhythm. It was totally alien to him.
And the specific example was about a lecture.
Yeah, the professor was talking about the lochs ecosystem. Loch. L-O-C-H, the Scottish word for lake. But with the strong accent, maybe the way the chi sound was pronounced, and maybe a bit of non-rhotic influence, the student heard lock, L-O-C-K.
Lock, like for a door.
Exactly. And because he was already struggling just to keep up with the speed and the overall flow, he couldn't easily stop and ask. So he spent the next 15 minutes of the lecture utterly confused, trying to figure out what padlocks and security devices had to do with biology and nature.
Oh dear. A complete communication breakdown just because of one word distorted by accent.
And it highlights that knowing the vocabulary isn't enough if you can't recognize its sound in different dialects.
And these dialects aren't just random noise, are they? Linguists like Peter Truggill have shown how they develop systematically.
Truggill's work is key here. It reminds us these variations aren't arbitrary. Dialects evolve logically over time due to things like migration patterns, social groups sticking together, historical changes. These lead to consistent shifts in pronunciation, yes, but also in interonation patterns, where the stress falls in a word, even vocabulary choices.
So learners aren't just battling random variations. They're dealing with the entire history of the English language spreading and changing.
In a way, yes. And today, the situation is even more complex because of global Englishes. Learners aren't just preparing to understand native speakers from the UK or US anymore.
Right. In international business, science, travel, you're just as likely to hear English spoken by someone from China, India, Brazil, Germany.
Absolutely. And each of those speakers will bring phonetic influences from their native language into their English. This creates new layers of accent variation that standard textbooks rarely cover.
Can we track how one word might change through these layers?
Sure, let's take schedule, a classic pronunciation battleground even between native speakers.
Right. Americans often say schedule. Brits often say schedule.
Okay, so a learner might be trained on one or both of those. Now let's imagine that word spoken by, say, a native Mandarin Chinese speaker whose language might not have the consonant cluster easily, or might sometimes swap L and R sounds.
Okay.
The pronunciation might shift again. Maybe it comes out closer to skedu or something else entirely. The learner now has to map this third, quite different sound pattern back to the concept of schedule. Each new variation puts more strain on the brain's pattern matching ability.
So the practical takeaway here isn't just learn more words. It has to be about exposure, right?
Intentional, diverse exposure. You absolutely have to train your ear. Don't just listen to one type of English audio actively seek out variety.
Like BBC for British sounds, NPR for American.
Yes, and then go further. Australian Broadcasting Corporation, ABC, news from India, maybe Al Jazeera English, which features speakers from all over the world. Find podcasts or YouTube channels from different English-speaking regions in Africa or Asia. Force your ear to adapt.
This brings us back to the German student in Scotland. He didn't succeed by studying more books.
He didn't. His breakthrough came when he stopped avoiding the difficult dialect and deliberately immersed himself in it. He joined a local pub quiz team.
A pub quiz. Talk about trial by fire.
Exactly. Fast-paced questions, background noise, local slang, jokes, strong accents. It was the most challenging listening environment imaginable. But that forced regular immersion, that struggle, was what finally attuned his ear. His brain learned to find the meaning despite the unfamiliar sounds, not just by relying on perfect textbook pronunciation.
All right, let's move on to reason 3 for why listening is so tricky. We can call this the invisible glue. It's all about connected speech. We know English spelling is messy, 44 sounds, only 26 letters, loads of inconsistencies.
True, the spelling is a challenge in itself.
But maybe the bigger issue for listening is that in real speech, words don't usually stand alone with neat little spaces between them like they do on a page. They flow together, they merge.
This is a huge one. It's perhaps the single biggest aspect of natural speech that catches learners off guard and contributes massively to that feeling of fatigue. Native speakers use connected speech totally unconsciously to make conversations smooth and efficient.
And this involves a few key processes.
3 main ones we should probably touch on. Linking. Elision, which is dropping sounds, and assimilation, where sounds change to be more like their neighbors.
Okay, let's break those down. Start with linking. What does that mean?
Linking is basically when the last sound of one word connects smoothly to the first sound of the next word, especially when a word ends in a consonant sound and the next starts with a vowel sound.
Makes it sound like one long word.
Pretty much. A simple example. I need an apple. Spoken naturally. The od sound at the end of need links to the es sound of an, and the n sound of an links to the a of apple. It comes out sounding more like, I need an apple.
So if you're listening specifically for the separate word an, you might just miss it because it's glued onto need.
You very likely will miss it, yes. Your brain doesn't register the gap you expect.
Okay, what about elision? Dropping sounds.
Elision is basically phonetic laziness, but we all do it. We drop sounds, usually consonants, from the middle of words or phrases to make them easier and faster to say. This makes the word shorter and potentially harder to recognize.
Give me an example.
Think about next door. Very often, the T sound at the end of next gets dropped, especially before the die of door, so it sounds like next door. Or facts often becomes facts, dropping the T. He must be might become he must be.
So information is literally disappearing from the sound stream.
Yes, phonetic information is just deleted for efficiency. A really common one is and, often becoming just N rock and roll.
And the third one? Assimilation. Sounds changing.
Assimilation is where a sound changes its quality to become more like a neighboring sound. Again, it makes pronunciation smoother and faster. A classic example is, did you eat?
Which almost nobody says that clearly, right?
Almost never. The deed sound at the end of deed and the Y sound, at the beginning of you blend together. They assimilate to create a J sound. So did you becomes did you, or even just did ya. And then the T at the end of eat might get softened. The whole phrase comes out sounding like DG.
DG. Wow, that's a long way from did you eat.
It is. If your brain is scanning the incoming sound for the clear sounds of did and you and eat, it's going to completely miss digit. The moment has passed before you can even start to decode those compressed, altered components.
No wonder listening practice feels so demanding. It's like decoding a secret code sometimes.
It really can feel that way. And tied into this is the whole concept of weak forms, which linguists like Peter Roach have studied extensively. These are those little grammatical function words, prepositions, articles, auxiliary verbs, conjunctions.
The glue words that hold sentences together.
Exactly. And in spoken English, these words are almost always unstressed and dramatically reduced. They take on their weak form.
Which usually involves that sound, the schwa.
Very often, yes. The schwa is the sound of unstressed syllables, the sound of weak forms. So the word to often becomes the, for becomes fur, can, the ability, becomes can, of becomes in, are becomes
These tiny, quiet sounds.
Super short, super quiet. In a fast sentence, they're incredibly difficult for a learner's ear to pick out, especially when they're sandwiched between the louder, stressed content words nouns, main verbs, adjectives.
So your brain is struggling to hear the very words that signal the grammatical structure of the sentence.
Precisely. And this problem gets exponentially worse when you add any kind of background noise.
Right, if you're in a noisy cafe or on a busy street.
That ambient noise will completely mask those already quiet, weak forms. They just disappear into the background hum. So the learner is left hearing maybe the main nouns and verbs, and they have to use precious mental energy trying to guess or reconstruct the sentence structure without the grammatical signposts.
This brings me back to that anecdote about the Italian learner studying for her IELTS exam. Her native language actually worked against her here, didn't it?
Ah, yes, that's a perfect illustration of how connected speech clashes with expectations based on your first language. Italian, like Spanish, is generally considered a syllable-timed language.
Meaning each syllable gets roughly equal time and clarity.
More or less, yes. There's a more even rhythm. English, on the other hand, is a stress-timed language. We rush through the unstressed syllables, often the weak forms, and give more time and emphasis to the stressed ones. This creates that characteristic, choppy, rhythmic quality of English, and it's why connected speech phenomena like reduction and weak forms are so prevalent.
So the Italian learner was listening to an audio clip for her test, and the sentence was, "The train arrives at 10 past 2. Simple enough.
Seems simple, but because her brain was conditioned by Italian's syllable timing, it was expecting clear separation and equal weight for each syllable. When she heard the English phrase past 2 spoken naturally,
Which would link together, right?
exactly, the T might even drop slightly, linking the S to the T past 2, but her brain, searching for familiar syllable patterns, latched onto something else. It misinterpreted the sound sequence past 2S.
What did she hear?
She heard 10 pasta too, P-A-S-T-A, because pasta is a very common familiar word and sound pattern in Italian. Her brain defaulted to the familiar pattern, even though pasta made absolutely no sense in the context of train arrival times.
Wow. Cognitive interference in action. Her brain found a match, just the wrong one.
A classic case. It shows how deeply ingrained our native language's sound patterns are and how they can actively interfere with perceiving a different language's rhythm and connections.
Okay, beyond the sounds merging and changing, there's something else crucial we lose when listening compared to reading.
Punctuation.
A huge loss. In writing, we have commas, periods, question marks, exclamation points to guide the reader, show pauses, signal tone. In listening, all of that has to be conveyed by
Intonation, the melody of the voice. Precisely. Intonation, the rise and fall of pitch, becomes the auditory punctuation. It tells you if something's a statement, usually falling tone, a question, often rising tone, a list, pauses and sustained tone, or shows excitement or doubt.
And if you're already struggling just to decode the words at speed,
You're likely to completely miss those subtle but critical shifts in tone that carry so much meaning about the speaker's attitude or intention.
stress patterns within a sentence are part of this too, right? Changing the stressed word changes the meaning.
Absolutely. Take a simple sentence. I didn't steal your blue pen.
Okay.
If I stress, I didn't steal your blue pen, the meaning is someone else did. If I stress I didn't steal your blue pen, maybe I borrowed it. If I stress I didn't steal your blue pen, maybe I stole someone else's. If I stress I didn't steal your blue pen, maybe I stole your red one. If I stress I didn't steal your blue pen, maybe I stole your pencil.
Wow, okay. One sentence, 5 different implications just based on which word gets the emphasis.
And in writing, we might use italics or bold for that emphasis. In listening, it's all carried by the stress and intonation. If you miss that stress because you're focused on just identifying the words, you miss the speaker's specific point.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly to reason 4, which is related but focuses more on the words themselves. Vocabulary in motion. Reading helps build that solid, often formal, vocabulary base.
It does. You learn words from textbooks, articles, literature.
Spoken English, especially informal conversation, uses a whole different layer of vocabulary, doesn't it? Stuff that moves and changes much faster.
Oh, massively. We're talking about the constant use of slang, idioms that make no literal sense, phrasal verbs used in specific contexts, and new buzzwords or terms that pop up and spread incredibly quickly, especially online. This vocabulary is rarely front and center in formal learning materials.
And let's not forget the simple but persistent problem of homophones, words that sound the same but have different meanings and spellings.
Right. A small but constant background nuisance. In print, two, and two are obviously different. Or there, and there. Or pair and pair.
Easy to distinguish when reading.
But audibly, identical. The listener has to rely entirely on the surrounding words, the immediate context, to figure out which meaning is intended. This forces the brain to do a tiny bit of extra analytical work for every homophone encountered, adding another little straw to the cognitive load camel's back.
But the bigger challenge here is probably idioms and slang, right?
Definitely. Idioms are those phrases where the meaning of the whole phrase is different from the literal meaning of the individual words. Think, kick the bucket, to die. Spill the beans, reveal a secret. Bite the bullet, face something difficult.
You can't guess those from the words alone.
Not usually, no. They're chunks of metaphorical language. Native speakers use them constantly without thinking, assuming the listener shares that cultural knowledge. But for a learner, hearing an idiom dropped casually into a fast conversation can bring comprehension to a screeching halt.
And slang is even more slippery because it changes so fast.
So fast. Terms that were cool 5 years ago might sound dated now. New slang spreads like wildfire through social media. A word like lit, meaning exciting or excellent, or salty, meaning annoyed, or tea, meaning gossip.
These might not be in any dictionary yet.
Exactly. And they're used in very specific social contexts. This brings us back to that Brazilian friend at the party anecdote.
Right, the party situation. He had decent general English.
Yeah, standard education. He understood the basics. He knew party. He probably figured out lit. From the context, people were having fun. The music was loud. Lit likely meant exciting.
Okay, plausible inference.
But then his friend, speaking quickly and casually over the music, said something like, yeah, this party's lit. Hey, don't ghost me later, okay?
Yeah, ghost me.
Total confusion for the Brazilian guy. He knows ghost as, the spirit of a dead person. The slang meaning to abruptly stop communicating with someone, usually online or via text, was completely outside his vocabulary.
And in that noisy, fast-moving party environment,
he couldn't easily stop the flow and ask, sorry, what does ghost me mean? Without feeling awkward or slowing things down. So he likely just nodded, smiled, and moved on. But with that nagging piece of misunderstood information clouding his understanding of the rest of the interaction.
it shows how just one unfamiliar slang term can throw you off. And research suggests this informal stuff is really common in speech, right?
It really is. Studies looking at large corpora of spoken versus written English consistently find that conversational English contains significantly more informal elements, not just slang and idioms, but also things like fillers, contractions, hesitations, incomplete sentences, maybe 20 to 30% more than you'd find in, say, a written news report or an academic paper.
So if you're primarily learning from formal written texts, you're missing a huge chunk of the vocabulary and style needed for real-life listening.
You're basically unprepared for about a quarter of what you're likely to hear in casual conversation.
And this connects back to context too, doesn't it? Relying on instantly understanding cultural references or implied meanings.
Yes, heavily. Reading usually gives you more time and surrounding text to build context. A paragraph can set up an idea. Listening often relies on assumed shared knowledge and instant inference.
Like mentioning a name or event.
Exactly. If an American speaker casually mentions Watergate in a conversation about politics, they assume you instantly understand the implied meaning of political scandal or cover-up without needing any explanation of the actual historical event.
Or referencing the Great Depression implies financial hardship.
Right. For the native speaker, these are instant shortcuts to complex ideas. But for the non-native listener who might lack that specific cultural or historical schema, hearing the proper noun Watergate might just register as a name. They miss the entire layer of implied meaning, creating another gap in comprehension, another cognitive lag, while they try to figure out the relevance.
Okay, let's broaden out a bit for reason 5. So far, we've mostly talked about the language itself, speed, accents, words. But listening is also hugely affected by things outside the language, right? Like the environment.
Oh, massively. This is a critical difference from reading. When you read, you generally control the environment. You find a quiet spot, you adjust the lighting, you minimize distractions, you create your own little bubble of focus.
But listening often happens out in the wild.
Exactly. It's completely vulnerable to whatever's going on around you. Background noise is a huge one. Poor audio quality like a crackly phone line or a bad microphone. Static. Echoes. Trying to listen while doing something else, multitasking. All these external factors dramatically increase the difficulty.
We've all been there. Trying to understand an announcement in a noisy airport terminal with reverb.
Or deciphering what someone's saying on a Zoom call when their internet keeps cutting out.
Or just trying to follow a podcast while driving in heavy traffic.
These aren't just minor annoyances.
Yeah.
Psychologically, they have a measurable impact. Research, you can find studies in journals like Attention, Perception, and Psychophysics, consistently shows that noise directly interferes with language processing and increases error rates.
Why does noise hit learners harder than native speakers, usually?
It comes down to selective attention. Our brains have to actively filter out irrelevant sounds to focus on the important ones, the speech. For a native speaker whose language processing is highly automated, this filtering is also largely automatic and requires less conscious effort.
But for the learner?
For the learner who is already dedicating so much conscious effort just to decoding the basic sounds and meanings, having to also consciously filter out background noise. The cafe chatter, the traffic roar, the bad connection static requires enormous amounts of additional mental energy. It consumes precious working memory resources that are desperately needed for the core task of comprehension.
So the noise doesn't just make it harder to hear, it makes it harder to think about what you're hearing.
That's a great way to put it. It increases the extraneous cognitive load dramatically. I remember hearing about a student struggling with online university classes during the pandemic.
Common story, unfortunately.
Yeah. This student was dealing with a combination of factors. Lectures with diverse accents, which was already challenging, plus really inconsistent internet quality.
The dreaded connection freeze.
Exactly. Audio would glitch, words would get cut off mid-sentence. Now imagine, your brain is already working overtime trying to decode a weak form or understand a tricky accent, and then suddenly a key syllable just vanishes because of internet lag.
Your brain has to guess what was missed.
It has to try and fill in the blank phonetically, while also trying to keep up with the continuing stream of speech. It's constantly playing catch-up, constantly guessing, constantly compensating for missing information. That is incredibly fatiguing. The processing system just gets overwhelmed by the combination of linguistic challenge and technical failure.
Okay, so environmental noise is a big external factor. What's the final major reason we need to cover? Reason 6.
Reason 6 is the lack of visual and nonverbal cues in many common listening situations. If you're listening to something audio only, a podcast like this one, a radio show, a phone call, you're missing a huge part of the communication picture.
The visual channel is gone.
Completely gone. And think about how much information we get visually. There's that famous, maybe slightly oversimplified idea, sometimes linked to Morabian's research, suggesting that things like body language, gestures, facial expressions can account for a very large percentage, sometimes cited as high as 70% of the overall message being conveyed.
Whether the exact percentage is right or not, the point is, visuals matter a lot.
They matter immensely. When you strip all that away, the listener has to rely solely on the auditory channel, which, as we've discussed, is already full of challenges like speed, accents, and connected speech.
This is why watching a video of someone speaking like a lecture where you can see the speaker, or a movie with actors, is often so much easier than just listening to the audio track, isn't it?
Dramatically easier. When you can see the speaker, you get constant extra clues. Their hand gestures might illustrate size or direction. Their posture might signal confidence or hesitation. Their eye contact, their nods, their smiles, they all provide this rich layer of context that reinforces or clarifies the spoken words.
Without those visual cues, ambiguity just shoots up.
It really does. A speaker might use a quick gesture to show they're joking. Their facial expression instantly tells you if they're serious, angry, or confused. Without that visual confirmation, the listener has to interpret everything just from the sound, which is much harder and leaves more room for error.
This brings us right back to understanding things like sarcasm or irony.
Exactly. Sarcasm is almost entirely dependent on tone of voice plus visual cues. Someone might say, "Oh, that was a brilliant idea."
But the tone is dripping with irony.
Right. And maybe they roll their eyes or have a smirk on their face. The combination makes the sarcastic meaning, "That was a terrible idea," crystal clear. But if you only hear the audio,
and you're maybe a learner focused on just understanding the words brilliant and idea,
you might miss the sarcastic tone entirely. You take the literal meaning at face value. "Oh, they think my idea is brilliant." Complete misinterpretation of the speaker's actual attitude and intent.
And these kinds of misinterpretations, driven by the lack of visual context, can have real consequences, like that story about the Korean learner on the phone call.
Oh yeah, that was a painful one. It perfectly shows how missing cues can lead to unnecessary panic. The learner was talking to an American friend on the phone, audio only. At some point, the friend, just kidding around, said something like, "Oh man, you messed that up. You're fired."
This is a casual joke between friends.
Totally casual. If they were face to face, the friend would have been smiling, maybe laughing, the body language would be relaxed, the joke would be obvious.
But on the phone.
The Korean learner, perhaps already a bit stressed by the conversation, heard the words, "You're fired," and lacking any visual context to signal the joking tone, took it literally.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they apparently panicked, thinking they'd genuinely been kicked off some project they were working on together or something. All that stress and confusion just because the communication channel stripped away the nonverbal cues that would have instantly clarified the playful intent.
It really underscores the point. Listening isn't just about hearing words. It's about understanding meaning in context. And visuals provide so much of that context. When it's gone, the load on your auditory processing skills just skyrockets. Okay, so we've taken a really deep dive into these 6 big reasons why listening feels so much harder than reading. We've covered the speed, the contractions, the crazy variety of accents, the way words glue together, the tricky vocabulary, the noisy environments, and the missing visual cues.
It's a lot, and hopefully understanding why it's hard is the first step. It feels difficult because it is genuinely cognitively demanding for all these reasons.
But the crucial insight here, I think, is that every single one of these challenges, these mechanisms that cause the difficulty and the fatigue, they're identifiable. And if they're identifiable,
they're trainable. That's the key message. Listening comprehension is absolutely a skill you can improve significantly, but it requires moving away from just passive listening, having English on in the background and hoping you absorb it by magic.
which doesn't really work that well, does it?
Not efficiently, no. You need deliberate, focused practice that targets these specific challenges. It's not about the volume of listening as much as the quality and focus of your practice.
So let's talk practical strategies.
Yeah.
How do we tackle that speed demon first? The pace.
The most immediate fix is to give yourself a break. Start slow and build up gradually. Don't jump straight into listening to native speakers talking at full speed about complex topics. That's just setting yourself up for frustration.
Use the tools available.
Exactly. Most modern audio and video players, Spotify, YouTube, podcast apps, Audible, have a playback speed control. Use it. Slow the audio down to 0.75x speed, maybe even 0.5x if you need to initially.
Find resources designed for learners too.
Yes, seek out podcasts or websites that specifically offer slow English or clearly enunciated audio for learners. Start there.
Why is slowing it down so important in the beginning?
Because it artificially widens your processing window. Remember how native speech at 170 WPM might overload a learner whose effective processing speed is only 110 WPM?
Right, the mismatch.
Slowing that 170 WPM audio down to, say, 125 WPM, around 775x, brings the input speed much closer to your current capacity. It dramatically reduces the extraneous cognitive load. It gives your brain the time it needs to actually decode the sounds, access the meaning, and follow along successfully sequentially.
So you build success, not frustration.
Precisely. Aim for maybe 90% comprehension at the slower speed. Once you achieve that consistently, then you can nudge the speed up slightly, maybe to 0.8x, then 0.85x. You build up your tolerance for speed gradually, building confidence and reinforcing successful decoding habits along the way.
Okay, managing speed is step 1. What's next? Moving beyond just passively hearing it.
Yes, the next step is active listening. You need to engage your brain more directly with the material. This can take many forms.
Like summarizing.
Summarizing is great. Listen to a short segment, then pause and try to explain the main points out loud in your own words. Or take brief notes, just bullet points while you listen.
Forces you to process the meaning, not just hear the sounds.
Exactly. But maybe the single most powerful active listening technique, especially for identifying those tricky connected speech issues, involves using transcripts.
But how? Read along while listening.
Actually, the most effective way is usually to listen first without the text. Listen to a short clip, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, and try your best to understand. Then, after you've listened, read the transcript.
Ah, so you see the difference between what you thought you heard and what was actually said.
Yes, and that gap can be incredibly revealing, sometimes shocking. When you read the transcript, you'll suddenly spot all the things you missed. The gonna and wanna, the digit, the weak forms like fruv, the slang term that flew past, the way words link together unexpectedly.
It makes the invisible visible.
Perfectly put. That awareness, identifying exactly where your listening broke down, is the critical first step toward fixing it. You start to recognize the patterns of connected speech and reduction.
This sounds like the strategy that helped the Italian student you mentioned, the one who heard pasta too.
It was the core of her improvement. She started doing dictation exercises. She'd play a short news clip, listen intently, and try to write down precisely what she heard.
That must have been really hard at first.
Extremely hard. But it forced her brain to pay hyper attention to the actual sounds, the connected syllables, the weak forms, the rhythm, not just the main content words. By doing this regularly, she trained her ear out of imposing Italian syllable timing onto English. She learned to hear English as it is spoken, and that's what led to that fantastic jump in her test score.
Okay, so active listening, using transcripts, dictation. What about techniques that train the mouth and ear together?
Shadowing is brilliant for this. It directly tackles pronunciation, rhythm, intonation, and connected speech all at once.
Shadowing is repeating immediately after you hear someone speak.
Yes, almost simultaneously. You listen to a short phrase or sentence from a native speaker and you repeat it back instantly, trying to mimic their pronunciation, their pitch changes, their speed, their rhythm, everything as closely as possible.
Forces your mouth to make the sounds correctly.
It forces your mouth to reproduce those compressed sounds, those linked phrases, those intonation patterns. And as your mouth learns to make the sounds, your ear becomes much more attuned to hearing them when others speak. It creates this powerful feedback loop between listening and speaking.
And alongside shadowing, we need that diverse immersion to handle the accents, right?
Absolutely essential. Your practice needs to reflect the reality of global English. Don't just listen to one standard accent you find easy. Deliberately expose yourself to variety.
Mix it up. BBC, NPR, ABC.
Yes, use those major broadcasters. Find podcasts hosted by people with different regional UK accents or various American accents. Seek out content from Australia, Ireland, Canada, South Africa. And crucially, if your goal is international communication, listen to proficient non-native speakers from Asia, Europe, Africa, Latin America. Train your brain to be flexible, to adapt quickly to different sound systems.
Are there any specific tech tools that can help learners struggling with particular sounds or hearing words in context?
Technology is a huge help here. For nailing down the pronunciation of individual words, especially across different accents, a site like Forvo is amazing. You can look up almost any word and hear it pronounced by native speakers from all over the world.
So you can compare the US versus UK schedule directly.
Instantly. And then for hearing how words actually sound in the flow of natural speech, a tool like Youglish is fantastic.
How does that work?
You type in a word or a short phrase and it searches YouTube captions to find thousands of real-life video examples where that word or phrase is being used naturally in context. You get to hear it with different accents, different speeds, embedded in connected speech. It's incredibly powerful for bridging the gap between textbook words and real-world sounds.
Any others? Maybe for drills or feedback?
Sure. Language learning apps like Duolingo often have listening comprehension drills. And some tools, like Speechling, offer services where you can record yourself shadowing and potentially get feedback from a tutor on your pronunciation and fluency. Combining these tools can create a really well-rounded practice routine.
But eventually, you have to leave the safety of the app or the website, right?
That is the ultimate necessary step. All this practice is preparation. The real test and the place where the fastest learning often happens is in real life, unpredictable conversation.
Get out there and talk to people.
Join a conversation club. Find a language exchange partner online or in person. Participate in activities you enjoy where you have to use English to communicate, like the German student joining the pub quiz.
Why is real-life practice so crucial?
Because it forces your brain to juggle all the challenges simultaneously in real time. You've got speed, accents, slang, idioms, interruptions, background noise, the need to understand and respond. There's no pause button. It forces adaptation. It pushes your working memory to become more efficient under pressure. It's where the training wheels truly come off and genuine communicative competence starts to build.
And when learners start combining these deliberate practice methods, slowing down, active listening, shadowing, diverse immersion, real-life practice, what tends to happen?
You start to see this wonderful positive feedback loop, a confidence cycle. As they begin to understand more, maybe not everything, but more, and as they start to feel less constantly overwhelmed, their confidence grows.
They feel like they can do it.
Exactly. We saw this clearly with a group of learners who committed to weekly focused listening challenges. They started with simple news reports, then moved to interviews, then faster podcasts, eventually tackling things like stand-up comedy or complex debates.
And the result?
Over about 6 months, their ability improved, yes. But just as importantly, their self-reported confidence in their listening skills and their willingness to engage in conversations absolutely soared. They weren't just passively hoping anymore. They felt equipped. They understood the challenges and they had strategies to tackle them.
So the big takeaway is, yes, listening feels hard for very real reasons, But understanding those reasons gives you the power to target your practice and actually conquer it. Hashtag tag outro.
So just to bring it all together, listening often feels harder than reading because you're battling that relentless speed of natural speech, full of contractions and reductions. You're navigating a huge ocean of global accents and dialects that change how words sound. You're decoding connected speech where words blend and sounds disappear. You're encountering fast-moving slang and idioms. You might be fighting background noise, and you're often missing those vital nonverbal cues you get face-to-face. It is complex.
But knowing those 6 key mechanisms, speed, accents, connected speech, vocabulary, noise, and missing cues, that knowledge itself is your most powerful tool. It tells you what to practice and how.
Understanding the why allows you to be strategic.
Absolutely. And we want to leave you with one final thought to chew on. Just remember this. Every single native English speaker on this planet, no matter how fast they talk or how complex their vocabulary seems now, started out as a baby, just a babbler, struggling to make sense of the sounds around them.
That's true for all of us.
They spent years unconsciously absorbing the rhythms, linking the sounds, decoding the patterns. You, as a learner, are essentially trying to consciously build the complex machinery that they acquired unconsciously over many years. You're catching up.
It's a challenging task, but achievable.
So be patient with yourself. Keep practicing deliberately. Focus on identifying and working on those specific gaps we talked about today. And slowly but surely, that speeding train of spoken English will start to feel less like a terrifying blur rushing past, and more like a smooth, manageable, maybe even enjoyable journey. What do you feel is your biggest remaining listening hurdle right now? Think about it.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you some valuable insights.
We really do. And if you found this discussion valuable, please do help us out. Make sure to like this video, share it with anyone else who might find it useful, and definitely subscribe to this YouTube channel, Learn English Lab, to keep learning with us. Thanks for listening.